Welcome everyone to, let's see, this is day 2. And today's session is on driving regional prosperity, the private sector as a catalyst for growth and collaboration. As you know, the private sector plays a crucial role in shaping the economic well-being of states and provinces, driving innovation, generating revenue, and supporting sustainable growth. Businesses are key partners to state and provincial governments in fostering economic resilience and prosperity. This session will explore the impacts of private industry on regional development and the ongoing need for a strong, constructive U.S. Canadian relationship. With PNWER as a model for cross-border collaboration, we will discuss tangible ways the public and private sectors can work together to enhance economic vitality, streamline trade, and build a more connected and prosperous future. And so here we have panelists that I would like to welcome to the stage. Mary Snap, Microsoft Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. Welcome. And we've been putting her to work the past 3 days. Thank you. Aaron August, Puget Sound Energy Senior Vice President, Chief of Customer and Transformation Officer. Prabha Ramaswamy, Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, Chief Executive Officer, and Governor Chris Gregoire, my favorite, CEO of Challenge Seattle. Welcome. Governor, would you like to sit on this side and this side like the last? And where do you want to sit? Oh, I'll sit on the last seat.
I'm just glad there's enough chairs and the music stopped.
Exactly. And I'll sit next to the tallest person so you can see how petite I am. All right. So should we get started with your comments, prepared comments if you have any? So Governor, would you like to go first or last? And you may use the podium if you wish, or at your place there.
Thanks, Cindy. Good morning, everyone. For those of you not from Washington State, welcome to the great state of Washington. We are happy to have you, and we hope you will not see this as only a PNWER occasion, but that you will come back and visit us again and again. Since leaving office, I've become what's called the CEO of Challenge Seattle. It's a unique organization comprised of about 23 CEOs only, 3 nonprofit, the rest for-profit. The large companies located in our area, from Starbucks and Microsoft to T-Mobile and so on. And really, this is an organization intended to do public-private partnerships, Cindy, to find solutions to our most pressing problems so that we can have the kind of quality of life and economic vibrancy that we want. As part of this, we looked at a mega region. If you're not familiar, mega regions are kind of the economic vibrancy in the world. There are about 28 globally, 11 in the United States, and we're one of those 11, and it's called the Cascadia Corridor. It runs from Vancouver, British Columbia to Portland, Oregon. And these are all, mega regions are all highly competitive when it comes to economics. When we saw this opportunity 10 years ago, we said, we're not just about economic development, we're about quality of life, and the two come together. And since that time, we have had an amazing relationship between British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. And yes, much of it is economically motivated, but a vast majority of it is also the quality of life. An example, we put together our 3 cancer research centers, each uniquely gifted in one area or another, but not all the same. The results of which is they're looking to finding cures to some of our most common cancers. That's the kind of relationship we want to forge. So I come here today to continue that Cascadia Corridor and work with the rest of PNWER. But I come here most importantly to say that our region, which is Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia, will not be separated. We will not allow any policy in the United States to harm the relationship we have with Canada and most particularly British Columbia. So thanks for letting me join you today.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, representing Microsoft here. And let me just sort of give a big shout out to Governor Gregoire, who's been a partner from Microsoft for 20 plus years now, and an advisor in very, very strategic ways, and a support for a lot of the initiatives on which we are mission aligned with government. Cindy mentioned that I've been at Microsoft a while. It's been 37 years. Microsoft celebrated its 50th year this year, of which we are very proud. I'm happy to say that about 40 of those years, I think, have been here in the Puget Sound region. And we also have representatives in Canada for about 40 years as well, with about 5,500 people who are in Canada in 11 different offices. It is a major research and development center for us in Vancouver. So we are very proud of that cross-border relationship between the engineering and the customer support teams between Vancouver and Seattle. When I think about public-private partnerships, again, kind of going back in time, we were sort of a wild, crazy company in the beginning. Some of you, who are about my age might remember that time period, but really, Chris does too, I can tell. For the last 25 years, we have really focused on how we show up as partners in government and in the communities in which we live. And it's truly a 25-year time period. I remember in that period in the early 2000s, going to Olympia, going to state offices in Michigan and Illinois and other places, initially just to introduce ourselves, to be frank, with governments in those states that we were most concerned with certain policies. But as we worked on that, it became more than just introducing ourselves. It became a long-term partnership with alignment on issues that were important to the region and which were important as well to Microsoft. So I think about that mission alignment. It's important that our employees are productive and happy members of the communities where they live. So issues like affordable housing, issues like transportation, issues like education are important to the public sector, but really important to our private sector as well. And as I think about that, we've had a number of programs in various places around the country, but particularly in the region. I think I just would start, as we head into the conversation, to talk about education. We have been engaged with the state on education issues for over 20 years, and our engagement has evolved depending upon the needs. We first started talking just about digital literacy, how we got people comfortable with the internet, to be honest with you. And that was a very long time ago. We then focused, when I first started working in the area of 10 or 12 years ago, on computer science education. Why? Because there were a dearth of computer scientists that would drive innovation forward in the state, across the nation, and across Canada. So within the United States, we worked with each of the 50 state governments to ensure that their Department of Education included computer science as a credit in the science department to enable kids to graduate with those number of credits. Prior to that time, when we started, only 3 or 4 states recognized computer science as a science. It was viewed as an elective that you might take alongside, anything else. And it took us 5 or 7 years to do that. I am sorry to say that my home state of Kansas was the last of the 50 states to do that. Don't quite know why that happened. Washington was among the first of those. From computer science, we have focused on workforce development, with public-private partnerships like the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship, and nonprofits like Washington STEM, where we have been committed for 10 or 12 years. And now thinking about AI skilling with our Microsoft Elevate announcement, which will enable us to work on a global basis, but also in the United States, to put dollars behind skilling efforts for nonprofits, community colleges, governments, but also dollars to create curriculums for AI skilling that can be used around the world and across the nation and into Canada as well. So you think about those lessons, it's essentially a 20-year trajectory of long-term commitment on a topic, engaged with government side by side, a seat at the table early on to work to develop curriculum, training, awareness, and to provide accountability where we can measure the work that we've done. So we like to think about that as the way that we get engaged with government. We are a technology company. We lead with technology. And there are many ways we can use technology to enable prosperity and great collaboration and partnerships in the region.
Good morning. A real pleasure to be here. Prabha Ramaswamy. I'm the CEO of the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. Before I make my comments, I'm curious, how many of you in this room are from the United States? All right. So I think my opening comments are going to be about the province of Saskatchewan. And I want to talk a little bit about private sector in Saskatchewan. And so many of you may not be aware, but Saskatchewan is a small province, Western Canada, a province of about 1.25 million people. No bias, but we punch way above our weight class, and I'll tell you why. Saskatchewan is the largest producer of fertilizer and potash in the world. Saskatchewan supplies 85% of potash to the United States of America. Saskatchewan is the second leading producer of uranium in the world and supplies 27% of uranium to the United States. Saskatchewan as a province has 40% of Canada's farmland, which is about 62.2 million hectares. And we engage in some of the most sustainable farming practices in the world. Innovator around zero-till practice, which is, the least soil disruption. Critical minerals. You've heard a lot about critical minerals in the last few days. Saskatchewan has 27 of the 34 critical minerals that are really important to economic security. We are one of the largest exporters in Canada per capita. 55% of the exports from the province of Saskatchewan is to the United States. So I want to emphasize again that while things may have changed, United States will continue to be a trading partner in Saskatchewan. And as we go along, we'll talk about how the private sector partners with public sector, but I'll leave you with one last comment. Saskatchewan is called the breadbasket of the world.
All right. Hey, and I'll clean up here. Aaron August. I am the Chief Customer and Transformation Officer at Puget Sound Energy. I usually win the title for most syllables in a job title as a panelist. So glad to have that one still in the bag. Any Puget Sound Energy customers in the room? All right, a little bit. So we'll do a quick PSE commercial. So Puget Sound Energy, it's Washington State's largest and oldest utility. You may have, judging by hands in the room, traveled here on a Boeing plane that was an Alaska airline plane, drinking Starbucks coffee while surfing the web on your T-Mobile phone, buying something on Amazon, or working on a Microsoft tablet. Those are all of our customers. We've been at the center of innovation, and we've watched this region grow and thrive, and it's been a privilege to do it. I think I'll take my comments to the place of just broader utility and then zero in on a lot of what we heard this morning. Actually, it's kind of quite scary, but it's the world we live and breathe in. So as a utility, kind of back in time, safe and reliable, those are table stakes. Every utility needs to be safe and reliable. And then safe, reliable, affordable, right? As rate cases started to introduce increases in your bill. Then it was safe, reliable, affordable, clean. And then the tensions you start to get tugged on to say, be very clean, but very cheap. And oh, by the way, all this aging infrastructure, make it reliable and make sure nothing breaks and there's no fires that start and everyone's safe. No utility in this world, in my opinion, is 4 for 4 at doing all of those right now. There's different conditions, Europe in particular, where you can say there's more affordable power there and it balances the scales a little bit more. But when you specifically zero in on North America, there's not a utility that is 4 for 4 in that space. But that's not where we're at. Now we're at safe, reliable, affordable, clean, resilient, right? Comments this morning. The shoulder seasons of winter, fall, or summer, spring, like those two seasons, they're tugging at each other. It's going to get wetter. It's going to get warmer. And what utilities have planned for, and just I'm curious, show of hands, has anyone ever thought of your utility as an innovator? Like when you think utility, do you think innovation? Sweet. That's enough. I got a half a hand. That's a first. It's usually a zero. So now you've got this entity, this industry, and again, Puget's one of many that are trying to innovate. You've got people that work at these organizations that 8 to 5, very steady job, keep it safe and reliable. Regulated monopoly doesn't really start to push on innovation. And so we're at this tipping point where in order for us to be safe, reliable, affordable, clean, resilient, now accessible, right? Access to energy, speed to power. 10 years ago, the industry was in what was called the utility death spiral. Utilities were scrambling to find out, what are we going to be? Because there's no load growth. We need to change our business model. We're not going to survive. Fast forward to today, there's so much load growth coming at us. We can't upgrade the system as fast and as safely as what our customers want. And so those 6 components, to me, the only way we solve all 6 of those things is through collaborative relationships with public and private sector, is through finding people who innovate in this space and want to solve problems, because utilities at their core, they're hometown energy providers, right? They're made up of people, 3,300 plus at PSE, that love working for and trying to deliver for our customers every single day. And so when I think about this conversation today, and what really gets me excited is figuring out where we can work together to win together to, again, go 6 for 6, safe, reliable, affordable, clean, resilient, accessible. So please help us on this journey.
Excellent. I actually do believe utilities are innovators, because a long time ago, I used to type those right-of-way reports for the Seattle City Light. So yeah, you've come a long ways. So let's go ahead and get started with the questions. If you would, and you may chime in anytime, because we want this to be truly a conversation. How do you see your role as industry leaders and public leaders in supporting the policy priorities of our state or your province? And what does true public-private partnership look like from your vantage point? Governor, would you like to weigh in?
Well, having served as governor and now serving in the role of CEO of Challenge Seattle, the one thing that I have found and am asked often by legislators about is really the belief on behalf of the legislature we're in a public-private partnership. When in fact, all too often, the belief by the private sector is the state was facing a problem, the legislature found a policy to address it, and more often than not sent the bill to the private sector. That is not the definition of a public-private partnership by the private sector. Rather, their definition is this: see a problem, let's all get to the table. Everyone who's involved should be at the table, find a path forward. And yes, if that then results in some form of taxation necessary to support it, the support of the business community will be there. So I don't know how many of you have seen what I'm talking about, but I think that is a critical and essential rule that we should all follow about how to engage with the business community, and vice versa. How should the business community engage? So, for example, the business community shouldn't be saying no to taxes, but rather, what's the problem and how do we solve the problem? Let's work together to make that possible. We need to make sure everybody is being served well by the state. In terms of how can we help, we the business community, in terms of policies, very much like what Mary was saying. In terms of a governor or the legislature, the pressures are immense, particularly now. And those elected officials are really trying to fundamentally get through the day, get through the year, get through the 2 years or the 4 years, whatever their tenure is. When in fact, the business community is compelled to be thinking out a decade, 2 decades. That's where the partnership really comes in. So for example, what we're working on right now is transportation. And we're looking out 2 decades. And we're saying we need to be the first in the United States to have an integrated, sustainable, financially transportation system. That sounds simple. We work with Boston Consulting, and the only places in the world where you'll find that is dictatorships. Well, since we don't have that, we have to find a different way to do this. And that is really working together, private sector, public sector being, yes, we have today's problems that are crisis level all too often, but we need to also have the opportunity to think out, because when we don't, and that crisis comes along, it's too late. It's just too late. We're doing the same thing when we talk about affordable housing. We're saying, and we brought the issue to the fore in 2019, in which we said, yes, we have a homeless problem. Yes, we have a low income housing problem. Are we all aware that we have a working class, middle class housing problem? We're on the verge of a crisis. There really wasn't the belief there that that was true, and now we are in the crisis. It's a lesson of how we alert, because the business community has to think in those terms and far out, and help the legislative body. And in turn, the legislative body can help the business community understand, got to deal with the crisis of the day. We need you at the table, making sure that happens as well.
I have cousins that live in North Korea, and I do not recommend dictatorships. The quality of life is sucks.
Representative, could I just add really quickly? I think it's important when you think about the business community to ensure that it is a community and not just one company. And so the work that we do together, we really like to work in coalitions. It's important to have support of big business as well as medium and small businesses across these issues that are applicable to all. And for issues like this, our number one competitors, where we compete 24 hours a day, are our friends. So in the housing area, we have worked side by side with Amazon and others in that work.
Yeah. And now I heard your announcement about the education digital equity side. I am going to be calling on you, because our responsibility is to educate our children in Washington State. That's the one and only task. And yet we don't have the funds. And so for digital equity and education, absolutely going to be very welcome. All right, next question. And this is from the audience. So you can actually ask questions on HUVA if you haven't done yet. And I see that somebody already voted for it. And so given the political headwinds that we face with cross-border collaboration, what are some examples of how private sector can cut through that noise? Any takers?
I'll start. Thank you. Well, I think, there's lots of things that we can do to ensure prosperity across border. For example, I think about in the area of workforce mobility and talent. We know that we need to continue to educate our workforce with AI skills, and we know that it's so important to have everyone take advantage of some kind of post-secondary education. Doesn't have to be four-year college, doesn't even have to be two-year college. A technical program or a certificate is absolutely important. But when we have, credentials that aren't recognized across borders, and we want to ensure mobility for workers, that makes it really difficult for us to have that sort of workforce mobility that's going to be needed in the Cascadia corridor. So thinking about ways in which we can manage some standardization on some of these things is one way. It should be a low stakes way in which we can continue to ensure prosperity and mobility across our region. And the goal is to really find these things that will really make a difference in prosperity. They should be table stakes for us to continue to work on.
And there, I may pull the thread here a little bit and just say, if you zoom into two meta categories of transportation, electrification, and climate resiliency, there's a lot of things I think we can continue to learn. And when we go through this, so transportation, over 100-year-old industry that is going to change forever, right? And we're in the middle of that right now. With that change is going to become the need for a bunch of policy evolutions. And so what policies might be working more north that might work down here or vice versa? I really do feel like best practice sharing and being very open and honest about change and what we need to ultimately transform is another way to do it.
And maybe I'll chime in. And so your question was about...
Eat the mic, please.
Your question was, given our current environment, what can public sector do, right? And I think one of the things we've done, the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, of course, is to put it simply, we're a lobbyist group. We work on behalf of the business community. And Small business is big business in Saskatchewan. 99% of our businesses are what I would classify as small business. One of the things we did around tariffs, when President Trump announced tariffs, I mean, we talked about the impact of tariffs in Canada, and it's, I think we came up, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce said, it would cost about $1,900 per household and a 2.6% hit to our GDP. But what we thought was really important is to communicate with the Americans the impact of tariffs on the United States. And so the estimates was from the United States Chamber of Commerce, it was a $2,000 hit per household and a 1.6% hit to the GDP. One of the things we started doing is I started meeting with the CEOs of 10 state chambers in the United States that do the most trade with Saskatchewan. And I think what was really important for us as chamber leaders to understand is what is the impact on private sector. And I think we found a way to create shared commitments to make sure that private sector is able to weather the storm. And it was very interesting. We also met with the United States Chamber of Commerce, and our premier, equivalent to our governor, was also in the room when we met with the United States. And it was quite impressive to see coast to coast across the borders, Canada and the United States, the business community had one message. And there are some things that Canada has to address, whether it's fentanyl, illegal immigration, NATO spending, digital services tax, but tariffs may not be the answer, right? So I think collaboration, coordinated effort and strategy to work together as the United States and Canada is actually something that would support private sector.
Absolutely. And I think we were pushing at the same time as well from our end. Governor?
When this tariff issue and the reference to the 51st state all began, because of the Cascadia corridor, I paid a visit to the premier in British Columbia and asked, okay, what is our relationship going forward? After I apologized for what was taking place. And we had a very good heart-to-heart talk. And what has happened since then is we've upped our game. Not reduced it, upped it. We are in the process of looking for how do we connect ourselves even greater than what we have before. If you look back a decade ago, major companies in Washington state were not located in Vancouver, British Columbia. Go to Vancouver today, downtown, and you will see those companies have now located in Vancouver. We have become unbelievably close. We import oil from BC, we refine it, and we send it back. We're not across a international border alone. We are best friends. We work together, and we're highly dependent on each other. A major trading partner going both ways, import, export. So we are now working on ultra-high-speed rail. How do we get that from Vancouver, British Columbia to Portland, Oregon to connect us even greater than what we have historically? We have a $50 million grant from the United States. We're working on it now. We are working at it more than we ever have. At the same time, we're looking at how do we exchange workforce? Because we are so co-located now in terms of our companies, we have to make sure that the advantage that we've always enjoyed, which has been our workforce, doesn't subside because people can't get visas because of all number of things. So we are now working even closer on how do we train, because we are an innovation corridor. Technology is our number one industry together, if you will. All three of our jurisdictions contribute majorly to that. So we're looking at how do we exchange our workforce? How do we train the workforce of tomorrow? But we're not doing it jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but we're doing it together. We think that is the economic future of those three jurisdictions. And we also think it's the relationships that will stand the test of time, no matter what comes out of Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. And this, just to bring it down to your sectors and related to a question that's being asked, whether some specific ways your organization has proactively engaged with policymakers, us, right, to co-create those solutions, intentional solutions, because they didn't happen accidentally. They were intentionally done for the regional economic challenges. And that's in the context of the question where some policymakers, even though some of us try really hard to understand your stakeholders and our constituents, some of us are in jurisdictions that are sometimes could be described as hostile to private sector.
Yeah, it's all right. You guys got it right. There you go. Perfect. I'd use Challenge Seattle, actually.
Yep.
I'd use Challenge Seattle as an example. And so when COVID happened, PSE was actually one of the first utilities in the nation to have to respond to that. One of the first cases, was up this way. And like all of us, it was, what do we do? And every utility worker says, well, we have to provide safe and reliable energy. But how do we continue to do that with so much unknown? Because of our engagement with Challenge Seattle, we were able to work with and understand from other organizations, specifically in Asia around that are members, what are they doing? Because they had exposure to it first. And so that little bit of a runway was able to give us enough to be able to come up with a plan that allowed us, again, as the first utility to really deal with this, put ourselves in a position to be as good as we possibly could in such a vast unknown that we worked through.
Can I add to that? When COVID hit, the real leadership began by the private sector. When it was Microsoft and Amazon, we had an emergency meeting. We talked about what they had seen, to your point, globally. What could we expect? What could we do right now? That was a Sunday. We were the first state to have a death, and it was a wake-up call. And by Tuesday, as I recall, Microsoft and Amazon had said, we're working remotely. That was a Sunday. That was a Tuesday. The rest of the private sector followed suit. We began working with the public sector. We met with the governor and we said to the governor, the CEO of Starbucks, we deliver about 1 million cups of coffee a day globally to satisfied customers in the most efficient way. Microsoft said, we have the technology for you to be able to have the kind of vaccination facilities that you really need at scale. Kaiser Permanente said the same thing. Costco said, we can help you get whatever you need globally. We created a command center, a public-private command center, where we converted things like Boeing started making masks, where Nordstrom started making uniforms, where we got the PPE globally because of the contacts that these companies had. But the story I want to tell is the one that was at the end of it all. There was high skepticism at the beginning. This kind of public-private partnership, this can't be. We don't trust those private sector guys. They want something. They're going to be asking for something. I personally had to write, we ask for nothing, we want nothing. This is a humanitarian crisis. Because of my previous employment, they accepted that. At the same time, the public sector was like, well, the private sector was like, well, the public sector really can't handle this. What they both learned is they couldn't do it alone. And the only way they could do it is by working together. I got emails from the private sector saying it was the most important thing I've ever done in my career. I feel like I've served the people of my state. I got emails from the reverse. I never understood how much the private sector could offer and partnership. Can we do this everywhere after COVID is over? So we learned a lesson. Fortune magazine wrote it up, said it was the single greatest public-private partnership in the country. And if it had happened everywhere, thousands of lives could have been saved. But the lesson that was learned was the private sector cannot do what the public does well, and vice versa. Today, we're formidable, and there's not much we can't do when we work together.
Yep. I just want to add on to that. And the governor has just done a great job of talking about it. But when I think about Microsoft's role in that, I know that our president was on the phone with the governor of the state virtually every day. Our role went from, having vaccination facilities on our campus all the way up to working in collaboration with the University of Washington to provide data analysis to really identify incidences, hospitalizations, unfortunately deaths, but being able to provide that technology through a program called AI for Good, which was just sort of a fledgling program at that period in time, was just, I think, amazingly important. So being able to provide the physical needs from PSE and the other companies for sure, but that role of technology in using AI, data analysis, and providing that information in collaboration with the University of Washington's Fred Hutch and Population Health Initiative to the state was also incredibly important in us being able to track and to help mitigate.
Thank you. And I think you answered my second question already, some concrete examples of successful collaborations. And thank you also very much for making sure lives were saved and that we could literally recover from that unexpected, anyway, pandemic. I'm still Novid, so I still haven't had COVID yet. So there's a few, I know, a few of us. My
You said that out loud.
Oh, I did. I was a microbiology major, and so that's why you still see me masking. And my 92-year-old mother is still Novid, so that's why we're still doing that. So I guess going in even deeper, how can we continue cross-border collaboration in light of the trend towards sovereign technologies with critical emerging technologies, and of course all the critical minerals, and then even the power need that we have, that at least what I gathered so far is that unless we are planning right now for the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, we will not be able to provide enough power to do everything that we want. Yeah. Would you like to get started?
Sure. So I guess we'll start on the things we won't be able to do because we haven't started yet. As I think about like AI, and it's been mentioned, so AI is going to be the very thing that's going to help us be better planners, better thinkers, thought partners. But that very thing is the thing that we've needed to start, to your point yesterday. And so some of the different things I think we might be able to do cross collaboratively is really challenge the centralized power system. So it's not these big transmission lines. We need them. I'll be very clear. We need all forms of energy right now. So if you hear me say the word DER, stands for distributed energy resources, I'll go down that path. But we need all forms of energy. That's kind of thing one of how do we make sure we have what we need 10 years from now. But then we also need to push the paces on how we innovate. And so kind of like how the governor described Challenge Seattle and COVID, we had to work together, private and publicly, partnerships, to solve really difficult, complex, never before seen problems. And I think for us, distributed energy resources, so that's things like solar, battery, microgrids, if you've heard that term, it's been around for a bit, but energy networks that you can create in your communities. How do you do that in your neck of the woods? How do we do that in ours? And then how do you connect them all with these big transmission lines? I think we need to create both speed today, but then power for tomorrow. So speed today would be through a distributed network, and then power tomorrow would be utilizing AI to help us plan better and get ourselves prepared for that future.
And if I could add, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. If I could add really quickly, because, you know, you're kind of raising the elephant in the room, which is data centers a little bit, you know, I'll just wade right in there with you. You know, when we think about, you know, data centers being located in different places, you know, there are obviously things that we really look for. But one of the things that we need to do and do immediately is work with the local government officials on permitting processes. And yes, we would love permitting processes to be faster. In some places, they really are. Others, it could take 2 and 3 years. But it's really important to have our representative locally in the community talking about what the impact of that data center will be. In the beginning days, and when we, like 5 or 6 years ago, when we first started talking about this, we realized that we were locating some data centers in places where there were natural resources, but a third of the mile away from where the data center was, the citizens and residents did not have quality connectivity. So we worked really hard to extend broadband connectivity to the community as sort of a first instance of how you really need to work together. As time has gone on, we've become much, much more sensitive to sustainability issues and have started to innovate in our own data centers to really address some of those issues. So now you'll see our data center, for example, in Wisconsin, which is going to be a hyperscale data center, kind of the biggest of the big of the data centers, will operate on a closed loop system for water. So once that original intake of water is in, we will continue to recycle that water so there is not an ongoing need daily to really take water from the community. I heard this loud and clear last week in Spokane from farmers and ranchers across the country who are concerned with it from an agricultural perspective. So it is really important to understand the needs of the community to try to address that as well. We need to find all sources of energy. You are absolutely right. And really bring on renewable sources and sustainable sources and energy. And that is an ongoing process. You likely heard about our work in nuclear in the 3 Mile Island, bringing on a nuclear reactor that had been deactivated to address the needs for providing additional kinds of energy for sustainability. So it's important, I think, to engage very early on. Let me just say you have to establish trust. And that does not happen by somebody flying in and leaving and never coming back again. You really need to have people on the ground who are willing to invest in the community, learn the community's needs, and invest back. So in some of the areas where we have data centers, we have identified particular needs. It might be skilling. It might be other kinds of things related to a need in the community for a public sector kind of establishment, governance sort of thing. So it's really important to identify with that community, well, not identify, listen to the community is the main thing, to really try to establish that partnership early on. And it is not transactional. It is a long-term relationship.
Yeah. And Prabha, as you answer, would you also address what the chamber's, I guess, position or reaction is to the SMRs? Because you are absolutely concentrating on clean energy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just respond to this from a different perspective in terms of a collaboration between the United States and Canada. So as you're aware, one of President Trump's irritants was Canada not hitting its target on NATO spending, right, which was 2%. And recently, Prime Minister Carney made an announcement of a 5% commitment to NATO. And so 1.5% of that 5% really is investing in critical minerals. And you may be aware that Canada is one of the richest countries in critical minerals. I said Saskatchewan has 27 of the 34, but really the United States is extremely interested in exploring the capacity that Canada has in critical minerals. And I think there's a great opportunity for collaboration in positioning sort of North America as a leader in energy transition. We, of course, in Saskatchewan are the second leading producer of uranium, and nuclear energy. In fact, in our state and province, 75% of our folks support nuclear energy. And so we have the largest sort of approval rating for nuclear energy in Canada. But it's very much on the radar in terms of energy transition and the different sources of energy. We support nuclear energy as chambers, and particularly in our province and state. So that would be something that our government here in Saskatchewan is looking at, and Ontario has already made some headway into it. So we would say that in Canada, that is very much a priority.
Yeah. All of the above, I think it's the position that I'm tending toward as well. We have 15 more minutes, and I wanted to give you room at the end to have a closing remarks. So just 2 more questions. And the last question is going to be about FIFA, my favorite question. And so what lessons can other industries learn from how your industry or company has engaged in the public-private partnerships? And how do you think we could be, PNWER region can be a model for other regions about the private sector innovation and job creation?
We've talked about a lot of that. I think people on the panel, those on the panel have talked a little bit about it. One area we haven't really talked about too much that I just wanted to raise, along with all of the other examples we've given, is the power of our own employees. So Microsoft has had a giving program, I think for 35 years, forever. Yeah. Really started at the instigation of Bill Gates' mother, Mary Gates, who was very engaged in United Way in the community and really encouraged Microsoft, Bill in particular at that time, to begin a program where employees could set aside some dollars for a nonprofit that they choose to support. That program has now given over $2 billion inclusive of the Microsoft match back to nonprofits. About 60% of that stays in Washington state. While employees can give to any nonprofit up to $15,000 a year and be matched by Microsoft, including matching their volunteer time at $25 an hour. We also, in the last, I would say, 7 or 8 years, have really started to curate opportunities for our employees. So one good example of that, I think, is as we've started to have more and more of both climate disasters and kind of human-made disasters, our employees have wanted to give back. And rather than have them work with their friends to charter a private plane to, drop toiletries, in a, forest fire area, we have worked to identify in those instances 2 or 3 nonprofits who are doing great work on the ground, who are prepared, who can work at scale. We put those opportunities in front of our employees on an internal web page. And as a result of that, have been able to really help at scale with some of these kinds of issues that are crisis issues. But beyond that, our employees serve on boards all the way, across the region, from the smallest theater performing group all the way up to, a United Way or things like Challenge Seattle. And I am just so proud of the work that our company has done in terms of engaging our employees, both with nonprofits, but also in civic engagement. And there is a real power to that. And I think it's one of the things that has attracted young people to come to Microsoft, is the ability to engage in that kind of a program.
Maybe I'll speak about a model that works really well for us in Saskatchewan. And when we talk about public sector, really we're talking about how we work with the government in advancing the priorities of the business community. So for example, when we had the tariff situation, I want to talk about China actually for a moment. China slapped 100% tariffs on canola oil and peas. And as I spoke earlier, we are an agriculture-driven province. It is the backbone of our economy. We are one of the largest exporters of agri-food in Canada per capita. And here's a model is where we are in ongoing consultations with our government, where our premier is consulting with the business community on what are those solutions. I accompanied a small private sector group along with our premier to Washington and to speak with different stakeholders in Washington on how we can handle the tariffs issue. So it's very much an ongoing consultation with the business community that's worked really well. It's very proactive. It's not after the fact and after policy has been developed, but it's very much engaging with the business community on an ongoing basis.
And maybe I'd pull a very local example here, and it's really founded on listening and trust, which are 2 comments or two subjects we talked about here already. But there's 2 school districts we're working with locally right now to do what's called vehicle to grid, or V2X. Does anyone know what the heck that means? All right. Sweet, I'm batting 1,000 today. So V2X stands for vehicle to everything. V2G is vehicle to grid. V2H is vehicle to home. So if you think about an electric vehicle, it is also a giant mobile battery. And so in the opening session this morning, we had heard greenhouse gas emissions. The largest driver of that, no pun intended, is cars or transportation. So there's one problem we want to figure out how to solve together, is how do we reduce emissions? And again, electrification of transportation helps do that. You go more locally, schools impacted with rising climate events. That creates a cascading effect of failure when school is out, and then now it's free lunch programs, it's children that need help, it's like it goes on and on and on. How do we fix that? You take the solution of both and combine it into a program. And that's what we're essentially trying to do with this V2X program. And again, 2 local school districts. An electric school bus also has a gigantic battery that is not doing a whole heck of a lot in the summertime when energy is peaking and events have a higher propensity of being called of we're running out of power. You can plug that battery in, and I'm way oversimplifying the technology here. Engineers in the room, I'm sorry, they're like, there's way more harder than that. But that battery, in essence, acts as backup power for a school. You can drive that bus with the right conditions, with the right setup to another location and plug it in. And now you have access to fighting a climate resiliency event. You've helped enable the solution to fighting that through GHG reduction, transportation electrification, right? So you're bringing down greenhouse gases, you're providing a solution in the community, and you're doing it in some of the most vulnerable populations. None of that's possible without partners, school districts, a utility, and then some really great vendors on the other side that are helping make this all happen.
I'll give you an example of how Washington State has interacted with British Columbia, because I think it's a unbelievably important lesson that we learned. In the times when I was in office, we would meet annually with the cabinet from the Washington State government with the Premier's cabinet in British Columbia. And we would exchange what are the problems that we're facing. And all too often we would find they were the exact same problems. And so we began collaborating on how could we address those, working together and bringing the private sector into the table to get their ideas of how we might make things work better collectively across the border. I'll give you a perfect example. As you may know, BC was the host to the Winter Olympics many years ago now. The Premier brought to that year before the issue that they had done some surveying and discovered that if the border wasn't more porous, more friendly to visitors, they would not be able to come out of that whole exercise in the black. Financially, it was going to be a total liability. We put our folks together with the private sector to come up with an idea of how we might make that work. And together they came up with the idea of an enhanced driver's license. How many here are familiar with that? Okay, that's its origin. So we thought, now this will never happen. This is a grand idea, but it ain't about to happen because we both have to get our federal governments to go along with it. Well, guess what? We did. And as a result of that, out came the enhanced driver's license. That border became more porous, more friendly. It was then adopted across the U.S. Canada border. So when we think about how to partner, I think it's about relationships. It's about building trust. It's about having friendships. It's about calling in a crisis and asking for help. We've become so close to British Columbia now that if we have, which is not uncommon, a flood problem on our border, a wildfire crossing our border, which knows no boundaries, there's no need to call. We both dispatch. We will both put whatever we have by way of resources immediately on scene and vice versa. That's, and it's in part driven by the private sector showing us how to do that. In Kelowna, British Columbia, trying to find permitting for affordable housing. They, in partnership with Microsoft, came up with a vehicle by which it no longer takes months, but it takes days in order to get that permit issued. So that's across a border, public-private partnership that I think shows we can do amazing things when we do partner like that.
Absolutely. And that, I think, almost 2-decade effort is we are collecting dividends on it because of the FIFA games next year, June and July, both in Vancouver and Seattle. So just show of hands, and you can vote twice if you wish. Are you going to stay in town or come into town and attend or participate in all those fan zones? Or are you going to be renting out your home, provide housing for all the people that are going to be very, 100% occupancy, and renting out your car to them so they can get around? So all for staying in town and enjoying, vote. All right. All for get out of town, make a little buck, and help others, vote.
What about all for no power outages?
Yeah, all for no power outages. Great. All right, we're at the end of the hour. This has been fascinating. So if you would give us like a minute or two, what would you like for us to remember? And by the way, there's a couple more on FIFA right after this one, as well as another one this afternoon. So a lot more to come on FIFA. All right, what would you like for us to remember as we leave this room?
So I opened with utilities aren't all that innovative, and I'm going to close with, but we really are, and we want to continue to work with you to do that. So if you walk away thinking, whoever your local utility is, reach out to them, have a seat at the table. They've got some really difficult problems on their hands, but to the governor's comments, our problem statements are probably more aligned than we realize. And I think we're so much more powerful, no pun intended, when we work together. That's point one. Point two, the other thing I'd say is for any of the policymakers in the room, the speed of innovation is really bumping into the pace of regulation. And those two things are reaching some pretty extreme tensions. And the types of solutions, when we work together to solve common problems, are going to require some pretty significant policy lifts to make sure that they work. And so also know that you have a seat at the table, and that between these three entities, we can create some pretty amazing private and public partnerships.
Just a couple of comments. One, from a larger perspective, I think I opened with Saskatchewan and what Saskatchewan has, the world needs. But I think what I want to, sorry, I've lost my train of thought here. Well, maybe I'll start with my second comment, which is the chamber network. So we represent about 10,000 businesses in our province. We're connected coast to coast through the Canadian Chamber and other chambers through every province in Canada. And that's about 250,000 chambers and 250,000 businesses. But we're also connected to the United States and the chamber network in the United States. So what I want to leave with you is the power of the chamber network to influence change and shape policy and support private sector in the next stage of evolution. I think what I wanted to say about Canada and Saskatchewan, which were my opening comments, is given what Saskatchewan provides to the world, potash, fertilizer, uranium, Canada has a very critical role to play as a leader in global food insecurity and energy security and economic security. And so I just want to leave you with that thought.
And I didn't really realize until a while ago that potash is fertilizer, so very important agriculturally, absolutely important. A couple of things from my perspective. We really believe in technology as an enabler. And so our hope is that we can continue to apply technology to help solve some of these critical problems around transportation and housing. It's also important that we have data and that we are able to utilize the data so that we can come up with the different insights around research or ways to address significant problems. So technology, data, nothing happens without great people who are engaged. And, at Microsoft, I'd say, I don't know of a better example than Brad Smith for the work that he does in collaboration with public-private partnerships. But there are many people at Microsoft across Canada and across the United States whose job it is every day to collaborate and to coordinate the public-private sector relationships. It's important to create forums for dialogue. I don't know of a better one than I've seen this last week at PNWER to create that kind of a platform for dialogue and to get people together to talk about issues, but then to take issues forward. And then finally, it's that trust and collaboration. It's not transactional. This is a long-term partnership that must be forged by trust and by communication.
Well, Cindy, thank you for emceeing. To colleagues, thank you. Very fun. To each of you, thanks for coming. And I'll repeat again, welcome to the great state of Washington, and come back when you want to just play and have a good time. We're a great place for that. I'd like to take us out to what we might foresee our future, that being PNWER. I work in the Cascadia corridor, but in PNWER, and it's very much akin to what Mary said. When you look at all that comprise PNWER, we really are an innovation capital globally. And if we could just take total advantage of that, there is nothing we can't achieve. So yes, it was, yesterday, today it's AI, tomorrow it's quantum, and in the year after that, it's something else. Let us be the center of all of that, but not just the research and development center of all of that, but the implementer of all of that. So we take that good, we do it ethically and with the right values, and we find cures to cancer, and we find cures to other diseases through the use of AI. We have the most educated workforce that doesn't lean on AI, as Brad puts it, but uses it to stimulate its own ability to grow and to be better. At the same time, looking at the opportunities that we can solve permitting, we can solve transportation issues, we can solve energy issues. So I think those of us that comprise PNWER, are sitting on a gold mine that could be the envy of the world if we took advantage of an amazing workforce that we all have, the technology and the private companies that we have, the elected leaders and the nonprofits that we have, put those together with a vision. Let us be the global center of technology and tomorrow, done the right way, with the right ethics, with the right values, put to work to make life so much better for all the people that live in our area.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you so very much, Governor. You're still my favorite governor. So thank you, every one of you, for your fantastic sharing of your time and your talent, as well as, of course, your deepest thoughts. And if you wouldn't mind hanging around a few more minutes, because I'm sure many of them would love to meet with you, or even me take a photo with you right over here. That'd be fantastic. So one more time, thank you also very much for serving.